Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vivian Benish, producing artistic director of PlayMakers Repertory Company, and welcome to our Where Are We Now conversation series, facilitated by and featuring local artists, scholars, and cultural workers, and today focused on Black women in journalism, inspired by our production of Jacqueline E. Lawton's Edges of Time. Edges of Time is a play receiving its world premiere with PlayMakers and starring company member Catherine Hunter Williams. It focuses on the singular Marvel Cooke, a pioneering journalist, writer, and civil rights activist. Later on in our conversation today, we will open up to questions from you, our audience, and the chat button at the bottom of your screen is a great tool to write those in. You can do that at any point during the conversation. It won't interrupt. Edges of Time streams through next Sunday, April 4th. So if you haven't already seen it, be sure to go to playmakers.org and get your tickets. It is such an honor for PlayMakers to have helped birth this play and to share it with the world. And because developing and producing new work, especially new work by women, is central to PlayMakers' mission and ensures our role as a place for the exchange of ideas and a place where inspiring great conversation is at the center of what we do, just like the one I believe you're about to experience now. Today, I'm excited to step aside and introduce the moderator of our conversation. She is a great friend to PlayMakers and a light and a force in the UNC and Triangle community. Performance studies trained Black feminist writer, scholar, and educator. She is an associate professor here at UNC Chapel Hill with a joint appointment in the Department of Communication and Curriculum in Global Studies. Please join me in welcoming Renee Alexander Craft. Hello.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for that.
I am so excited for this conversation and thank you so much. And I'm so excited to just turn myself off and get to listen. Have a wonderful time and thank you.
I am very honored to get to be here today and to get to help facilitate this conversation. So again, thank you to Vivian, thank you to PlayMakers for organizing this important talk. And thank you, Cathy Hunter Williams, for your wonderful and amazing portrayal of Marvel Jackson Cooke, as well as for your great work in calling us all together today. So we have three brilliant women that I get to share a bit of space. We all get to share a bit of space with today. I'll introduce them one at a time, and then I'll kind of call them all forward at the same time into our virtual space. The first is Dr. Trevi McDonald. She is the Julian W. Scheer Term Associate Professor in the Hussman School of Journalism and Media here at UNC Chapel Hill, where she teaches the Black press and US history and serves as the school's inaugural Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Prior to joining the faculty at UNC Chapel Hill, she taught communication courses at North Carolina State University, North Carolina Central University, and Spertus College. Trevi is the author of the novels Roundabout Midnight and Time Will Tell. She is the co-editor of two scholarly anthologies, Nature of the Sister, Black Women's Lived Experiences in Contemporary Culture, and Building Diverse Communities, Applications of Communication Research. And she's contributed to numerous anthologies and publications. She earned a BA in Radio, Television, and Film from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, and both an MA in Radio, Television, and Motion Pictures, and a PhD in Mass Communication Research from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. In 2008, Trevi received a Distinguished Alumni Award from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, and her novel, Roundabout Midnight, received an Outstanding Book Award from the National Association of Black Journalists in 2019. She is a member of the Society of Midland Authors, the National Association of Black Journalists, and Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Our next panelist is Rima Bland. She is the new director of the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting at UNC's Hussman School of Journalism and Media. Co-founded by award-winning journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones, Ron Nixon, and Topher Sanders, the Society seeks to increase the ranks, retention, and profile of reporters and editors of color in the field of investigative reporting. Rima graduated from the University of Connecticut and earned a master's degree in broadcast journalism at Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. She worked for CBS News, New York Daily News, Pensacola News Journal, WJCT Radio, and the Florida Times Union before moving into higher education as an adjunct professor in the journalism program at the University of North Florida. Rima moved to North Carolina in 2019, where she became the director of student media at East Carolina University. Her transition to the Ida B. Wells Society comes at a time when the nation faces a racial reckoning and a pandemic, which she says calls for dedicated resources that can help reporters uncover untold stories. And last, but certainly never least, Leoneda Inge. Leoneda is WUNC's race and Southern culture reporter. She is the first public radio journalist in the South to hold such a position. Leoneda explores modern and historical constructions to tell stories of poverty and wealth, food, health and food culture, education, and racial identity. She is also co-host of the podcast Tested, allowing for even more in-depth storytelling on those topics. Three of her most recent work of note include hosting the special podcast series Pauli, about the iconic life of lawyer, author, activist, and Episcopal priest Pauli Murray, A Tale of Two North Carolina Rural Sheriffs, produced in partnership with Independent Lens, and a series of reports on race, slavery, memory, and monuments, which won a Salute to Excellence Award from the National Association of Black Journalists. Leoneda is the recipient of several awards from the Associated Press, the Radio Television Digital News Association, and the Alliance of Women in Media's Gracie Awards. She was part of WUNC's team that won an Alfred I. DuPont Award from Columbia University for the group series, North Carolina Voices, Understanding Poverty. In 2017, Leoneda was named Journalist of Distinction by NABJ. She is a graduate of Florida A&M University and Columbia University, where she earned her master's degree in journalism as a Knight Baggot Fellow. Her travels include Berlin, Brussels, and Prague as a German-American Journalist Exchange Fellow, and to Tokyo as a fellow with the Foreign Press Center. I will invite all of you all to come into the room. It is such an honor to get to enter into this conversation with you all. You are powerhouses, and I can't wait to get to jump in together. So first, as I said, welcome. It's great to see your faces. I think I want to start with a question for each of you about your inspirations as journalists and your beginnings. So as people who were thinking about storytelling, thinking about journalism, who were you? One, so two parts of it. One, is there a moment or a memory that sparks for you when you said, this is the work I must do? This is work that I'm really invested in. And what was that work called? Was it journalism? Was it storytelling? Was it, what was it called? And then who were some of the early inspirations you looked to as you tried to carve out a life and work in this field? I'm going to start in order that you appear on the screen for me. So I'm going to start with you, Leoneda.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi. I must say that I'm one of those that probably always wanted to be a journalist. I mean, like always, like even in high school. I mean, even probably, before high school, because I guess my mother, she was a great inspiration because she always gave me journals because she said I would not talk. She says I wouldn't talk, but I would read and write. And when I did talk, she said I was used to speak in the third person, like Leoneda doesn't want to do that. You know, she said, I spoke in for the longest time. And then as I got older, and my father, you know, he was the type, you know, that would sit there every morning and read the newspaper with his legs crossed and his French cuff shirts on. I was like, wow, I need to read the paper like him. I mean, I always wanted to be a journalist, maybe just to impress my parents. You know how sometimes you feel, you know, I need to get my voice. No, I needed to impress them first. And so then I, you know, after I went to college and all sort of like summer camps with these explorer journalists, you know, those types of things. And so I guess I was nurtured early. And then when I think, because I've been in radio almost from the beginning, but I guess some of my favorite, I don't know if you all remember Norma Quarles. I was like, I want to be like Norma Quarles. You know, you had to pick someone to emulate, right? To get that voice right, and also to be able to tell those stories in a way that was compelling enough that anyone would even want to listen. And when I started college, you know, you almost had to start with reporting 101, you know, and I wanted to work for the student newspaper. And they were like, you haven't even taken a class yet. Like, you can't get anything published, even in the school newspaper. They're like, oh, no, no, no. And so I started volunteering at our campus radio station. And they said, wow, that comes very easy to you, doesn't it? I was like, I guess that's what I should be doing. And I just sort of stuck with it. And even after college, you know, there were so many people I tried to emulate. I was actually, I mean, I can't even think of all the names, but definitely, you know, I can't even think of everybody because I try to take a little bit from everybody. Like I say, going back to Norma Quarles, my favorite. And I always felt one day I would be the, you know, you dream big. I'm going to be the first Black woman on 60 Minutes, who they still do not have a regular correspondent. I guess unless Oprah pays her way on there, like she's the only, you know, she does special reports. I was like, I cannot believe in my lifetime, 60 Minutes still cannot, there's no Black woman good enough yet, you know, to be, so it really kind of breaks my heart. So I guess that keeps me working hard because I think I can do that now, actually, if I wanted to. But so, yeah, I always was a writer, always was a storyteller. And that's definitely how I got into this business. And I stuck with it because I was told early, make your avocation your vocation. You know, don't try to do something hard to take care of yourself. You do what comes very easy to you, and hopefully others will notice. And that's why I guess I'm still in radio.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Rima, what about you?
Hey there. So I guess the earliest inspiration is going to sound a little silly because I really didn't have in my mind to be a journalist for quite some time, actually not until I spent some time in college. But I remember one of the earliest kind of memories of a Black journalist who was like me in my mind was Rhema Ellis of NBC News. And my parents always watched NBC. We were diehard from local on to network. We were all about NBC News. So we watched it every evening, and I would see Rhema Ellis on there. And I was like, oh, her name is kind of like mine. Rhema, like they just add a little E. And so that right there drew me to her. And so I would just watch her and watch what she would do. And I, you know, again, I just remember being very young. I can't tell you exactly the age, but it just stuck with me that just seeing her there, it was like, okay, she can do that. Maybe I can do that too. And then kind of similar to Leoneda, my inspiration was also kind of my parents. They're both English majors, English scholars, like they were great writers. My mom will argue that she's the better writer than my dad, but which she is, but they were both very good writers, you know. So I drew a lot of inspiration from them, and I had a love of the written word because of them. So my natural instinct when I first started college was, okay, I'm going to go be an English major, go into English, be an author. And over time, actually, student media again. So I'm sorry if I'm repeating some of the things that Leoneda is already saying, but the student newspaper was kind of a strange inspiration for me because I didn't like my student newspaper at the time. I didn't like the Daily Campus. I really didn't like the editorials that came out of it. This was early 2000s, so there was a lot of very, this was University of Connecticut, so you can imagine the kinds of, the majority of the students and kind of the narrow-mindedness that was reflected in that. And I remember me and my friends who were in, the Black Student Association and in the gospel choir and things, they'd come back and they were so mad about the stuff that would come out of there. And so one day there was this one article where we were like, can you believe this? And so I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna write a letter to the editor. So I did. And this was still back when people were reading newspapers. So that got a lot of attention from like my classmates and things. They were like, yeah, so happy you put that in there. You told them and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, I like the way that feels. And I don't really like the stuff that's coming out of here. And I know when they're going to have the editorial meeting. So why don't I just go show up and see what they're going to talk about next? So I showed up at the next editorial meeting and listened to some of their ideas. And it was kind of funny because some of the things they were talking about suddenly when I was in the room, because I was the only one who looked like me in the room, some of those ideas didn't seem like such great ideas anymore. I could see they were kind of looking at me like, well, maybe we could do something different then. And so I just decided at that point that I was going to volunteer to be part of the editorial, the opinion page, because they didn't pay anything at the time. It was pretty open if you were a decent writer. So I was like, I'm just going to join the opinion page. And that went really well to the point where they were asking me to come back. By that point, I realized, I like this. I could get into this. Maybe I want to be a journalist. And I had some really supportive advisors, but they did tell me, if you want to get into this, you need to do reporting, not just opinion. So then I joined the news section side of the paper. Then I really got into it. And that was kind of how I got sort of the journalism bug. But for a lot of my career, I did not see people like me. I was the only person in the room. And then years later, I remember once I kind of got into the education beat and I was covering a lot of education for my newspaper, I went to one of the education writers Association conferences and I saw Nicole Hannah-Jones, and this was early on. And I just remember just at that point, just hearing about what she'd done at that point. She had done a lot of work on segregation and exposing the problems with segregation. And I just remember being so inspired because, again, there was somebody who looked like me, who was doing investigative work, who was doing serious journalism. And again, she's my boss now. I'm not just trying to big her up, but that was really an inspiration to me to say, like, you can do this and you can also do something big with this. You don't just have to be a shrinking violet in this business. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Trevi, what about you?
So I actually started out wanting to be a pediatrician. And then one day, sophomore year of high school, I yawned in chemistry class. And my teacher asked, do you know what just happened? And I was like, yeah, I yawned. He said, no, he traced how carbon dioxide and oxygen circulated through my body all the way to my toe and back up. And I thought, I can never remember that. There's no way I can be a doctor. And one evening I was watching our local news in Chicago, our NBC affiliate, and there was a Black woman anchor named Marlene McClinton on. So that sort of piqued my interest. And during my senior year of high school, I took the journalism class. And one of the things that our teacher had us do was write a letter to the editor of either the Chicago Sun-Times or the Chicago Tribune. And my letter about littering was published in the Chicago Tribune. And he also assigned us different beats. And my beat was the art department. And the very first story I wrote was published as a feature in our school newspaper. When I went to college at the University of Wisconsin at Oshkosh, I got involved, you're going to hear about student media again, with our campus radio station. And my sophomore year, I was the jazz coordinator and then program director. And I thought my professor, my radio professor, had like the absolute coolest job in the world. And that sparked my interest in becoming a journalism educator very early in my college career. Some of my other inspirations are Carol Simpson, who I frequently watched growing up. She anchored ABC Weekend News on Sundays, and then also a Chicago radio journalist, Felicia Middlebrooks.
Thank you. That's fantastic too. I have known you for quite a while, but I did not know that your first desire was to be a pediatrician. So, I want to ask you all now, thinking about some of the barriers that you all may have did run into early in your careers, and some of the barriers, sticking points, that journalists who may be entering the field now are running into. I want to give you the latitude to jump in at either of those spaces or both. A fight that you had to fight that you don't think folks entering now have to fight in the same way, or things that journalists who are just trying to get their toe wet, trying to just jump in, have to think about now and have to be mindful about. And I'll look to you all. Who would like to jump in on that first?
Well, I would say that one reason I stayed in radio is because some of my first jobs out of college were in television. But then I know at one television station, I think it was a CBS station, I noticed that, I was writing and producing the news for a young lady who was white from the University of Florida, who was anchoring the weekend news. And we were like the same age. And I know she didn't have as much experience as I had because, my father was hoping I would graduate from college because I had so many internships. Florida A&M was like at the time, like the largest accredited journalism school at any historically Black college. So, people would pour in from all the big media organizations. So we were gone all the time, right? And when you were saying inspirations, I remember interning at CNN in Washington, and just to get up early in the morning, even though he anchored at night, but I used to love now his Trevi, how can his name escape me? Bernard Shaw at CNN. I would always love to get his dinner for him, so I know I had more exposure and experience than this other girl, young woman. And I was like, man. And then that's when somebody tells you, well, why she's on and you're not on. I was like, I know. And for some reason, I embraced radio even more because for some reason, some people did not know my race on radio. They can't see you, can they, right? So they would only hear you. And even since I've moved to North Carolina, different guests have come through our studios. And when someone would say, well, this is Leoneda Inge, it would catch them off guard every time. I was like, how could you know I'm not Black? Oh my God. But sometimes they did not know. They did not know or they didn't want to know. And I'm like, man, I ram it down people's throat. I don't understand. I make sure that my work is representative and my ideas and framing. I did not know. I said, well, I guess that's working good for me. And, because that means I could be whoever I wanted in radio. And that's what I love. And maybe that's why I was able to get jobs, and I move along. But when I think of today, a lot of, I can only really speak to radio, even though I've taught students who wanted to be in television and newspaper and magazine. And really, I've always told them, I said, the sky's the limit for you guys now. I said, the only difference is you really have to know how to do all of it. Sorry. You have to be good in audio broadcasting, writing, editing, and be able to write for magazine as well as short and concise. You just have to be able to do a lot more. But if you're good at it and you work hard at it, hopefully you would get to go even further, than I have. It's harder, but hopefully now, you tell them, say, yeah, hopefully everybody knows Black Lives Matter now, hopefully, which means, you may be able to get your foot in a door that I couldn't get my foot in, especially, when they see you. And we're not going to even talk about the names because my name was changed. One of my first jobs, they just told me, they said, Leoneda Inge, that last name, It starts with a vowel, it ends with a vowel, you know. You got to change one of them, you know, the first name or the last name. And speaking of Chicago, Trevi, guess what I changed my name to on one of my first jobs?
What?
Remember Clarence Page's ex-wife, Leoneda McClain, who's at the Chicago Tribune? I took her name. I mean, because I wanted to keep the Leoneda, and I just changed McClain. And she was a brilliant Black journalist and editorial writer. And, you know, I just took her name. And I did write Clarence Page to ask him if I could use it, but he never got back to me. So I just kept it. But I only kept it for like a year. But I'm just saying, people they don't have to do that now. It's something, you know, you can use your name. And hopefully if your name sounds, you know, more ethnic, that is not a stumbling block, but it adds to who you are, maybe where you've been and what you've seen. You know, I hope that. I would really hope that.
Thank you for that. I'm gonna, which one of you wants to jump in next?
I guess I'd say, you know, one of the hurdles that I hope has changed, but I don't know, you know, if things have changed as much is, you know, just the difficulty of the lower expectations. The fact that, you know, it's almost palpable the way you can feel that when you walk into a newsroom. And I will say I've been in several different newsrooms across platforms. And also let me say, Leoneda, I'm so sorry for butchering your name the first couple. I should be extra sympathetic to that, because my name, you know, people get my name wrong too. So I apologize.
Oh,
I
no,
want
that's
to
okay.
take a space.
That's another thing. Well, it tells you when they
apologize for you for
change my name.
pronouncing yours too, Rhema. I apologize.
You know, I have no standing because I just butchered the name. So I am so sorry for that. But I would say that, you know, you walk in with names like Rima or Leoneda or Trevi, and you look a certain way, and you're a woman. I'm just going to say that because there's the gender part of this too. And, you know, it as accepting as newsrooms might be, as much as they might rejoice in the fact that you're the diverse candidate who's come in and brought your fresh new perspective, there is still that thing that makes it a little bit harder. And I wish I could have a smoking gun for that. I wish I could really sort of pinpoint the moments when that happens. But all I can tell you is that I've been in many situations where I can't really understand why, you know, an opportunity goes to somebody else who's, you know, we have equal, you know, education, equal experience. Sometimes maybe they have a little bit less than me. And I have to go, you know, a little bit over, not a little bit, I'm not even gonna, you know, placate it. I have to go a lot over. I have to go over and above. And I've seen this happen. I've had mentees too, where I've seen this happen. I had a young lady, brilliant young lady, who got written off. And I know what it was. I know it's because she was in a conference room with a bunch of, I'm just going to say it because we're here, white men who, for whatever reason, did not feel comfortable with some of the suggestions she was making. And nobody can really pinpoint it. Nobody knows why there's like this bad taste or this visceral reaction to, like, you know, somebody like us coming with suggestions or things like that, or asking to have an opportunity. And it's just like, I don't think you're quite ready yet. And so I've been 5 years removed from the newsroom. I don't know if that's still happening. You know, that's one of the things, of course, my organization is working to prepare people so that they can't these newsrooms can't have the luxury of just saying, well, you don't have quite the right training for that. You don't have quite, you know, you haven't gone to the same school, or you don't know how to do public records, or you don't know how to do this particular skill or that particular skill. But it, like I said, it was very palpable, even among all of the, and I did have, I don't want to dispel, I had some really wonderful experiences working in newsrooms, some really wonderful mentors, but there was still just that thing that I couldn't quite pinpoint, like, why is this person, you know, getting this assignment that I'm not? Why is this person getting this beat? Why do I have to do 2 or 3 other beats before I can get to this high level beat? Why do I have to jump out and put myself in danger's way and harm's way to show you that I can do this story? So that is something that I hope this particular point in time is addressing, and maybe pointing out that that's something that has happened to a lot of Black women, or they get pulled off things, or they get targeted because of what they are covering, which I think we can all relate to that as well. You know, and being the source of ear, because we're seen as not being able to be objective on certain topics. So I hope that this particular point is addressing that, but that I think that has been a big challenge.
Thank you, Rhema, and thank you for being patient with me as I
No problem.
too. Trevi, I want to pivot to you as well.
Yeah, I just want to talk about this from the perspective of someone who educates the next generation of journalists. And I know that a lot more of our top journalism schools are requiring some sort of diversity and inclusion education. And to piggyback on the point that Rhema made about Black women and journalists of color telling the stories from their perspectives and it being considered not objective. That's something that I think people are facing a lot. And then at the same time, journalists have to, Black journalists specifically, are often given a lot of invisible labor in terms of having to educate their colleagues who are not people of color on you know, what's going on in the community and on racism and on sexism.
Wow. And since I still work as a journalist every day, sadly, I see that has not really changed much. But, you know, one way that I've survived that, you know, even in public radio, and even with a few different news directors, for example, and editors, you know, I don't know how I got like this. Maybe it was my parents, but, you know, people aren't going to tell me no, but, you know, a couple of times, just a couple. And, you know, I felt that, no, I'm not quitting. I'm not moving. I have 2 babies. I'm not going anywhere, right? You know, I'm not. But what I would do is I think most of my best work has come from, you know, just being very creative and actually reaching out to other editors who I thought were better than the ones I was working with. You know, that's why, I mean, even when you read my bio, you know, when I did this big series with Independent Lens out of, you know, California, it's like, of course, it's like, they're wonderful. You know, and after a while, they would ask me, you know, to come and would you be a part of this project? So I do a lot of outside projects, even to this day, you know, because sometimes you have to show the people where you are, or no, remind them how lucky they are, you know. And I sadly, I still do it, you know. If you know, I spoke with someone at PBS this last week, actually. I was like, oh, that sounds great, you know. But earlier in my career, let's say 15 years ago or so, I would just look for them and say, you know what, I wrote this story about so-and-so, or this issue, environmental justice, whatever. And I said, maybe it would work well. And then it's so funny, they would say, yes, that's good. And you couldn't get that yes at your current job, could you? But I was like, wow, this editor in New York likes it. Wow, it's not me. So I guess oftentimes, to make sure I knew it wasn't me, I would just, you know, look for other journalists. And that's what's so good about the National Association of Black Journalists and the RTDNA and Associated Press. When you go to the conferences, like you said, you would meet these people all over the country and you say, oh, it's not me. It's not me at all. So I encourage young folks to do that. When someone tells you no, just write it anyway. Save it for a rainy day.
Yeah, that's amazing and wonderful and necessary advice. Absolutely. It's kind of staying there for a second. I wanted to be able to ask you all, understanding that there may be journalists of color who are listening, or journalists of color in the making, you know, who are listening. thinking about some of these invisible barriers that they'll have to navigate, or the invisible labor, Trevi, that you mentioned, that they'll have to figure out what part to do, how to make visible what's in, how to navigate all of that. And some of the places they can tap in right now, organizations they should be paying attention to. Leoneda, you've mentioned several of them that they really should be tapping into and paying attention to, or people to be following. If you're following different folks on social media, of course they need to be following you all, in addition to you all. So what are some of the things you would suggest to get them ready as they're planning to take a step into the field? Trevi, I'm going to start with you with this one this time.
So at the high school level, I recommend that students who are interested in going into journalism look into the Emma Bowen Foundation, because it is an organization that provides resources for students who are going into journalism, such as internships every summer. And that's an excellent program. We have a program right here at UNC, the Chuck Stone Media Institute for Diverse Media, that we have every summer for high school students. At the college level, like Leoneda mentioned, NABJ, but also NAHJ, the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, and just really take advantage of the opportunities right now. With us being in a virtual environment, it's a wonderful opportunity to get professional development as well as networking opportunities with these journalists.
I know in public radio, definitely at different stations across the country, starting in high school, they have different, I think even in New York at WNYC, I think they have radio rookies. I'm not sure if that's in New York or in California, but even at WUNC, out of Chapel Hill, we have a program for high school students, mostly I guess juniors and seniors, a grooming program for the summer. And I'm sure you could find it on our website. And there are several programs. And sometimes you need to, reach out a little bit and, it's like pick someone who you admire and then ask them, and I'm sure they'll lead you in the right direction. I was fortunate enough when I was I was out of my freshman year, so I had to be a sophomore in college. But I remember at Northwestern University, they used to have a program for aspiring journalists of color. They specifically, and some of the people that were chosen with me in that group from Spelman and Morehouse and Hampton, you had to be from a historically Black college, and they brought you all to Northwestern for the summer. And we had some of the top Black reporters in the country come and each teach us for a week. Like, they were grooming very early. And I know there's several programs like that still. So you have to really want to be a journalist too. you have to do a little research, but there are a lot of organizations for such grooming.
Thank you both, Trevi and Leoneda. I'm going to ask you too, Rima. I have to laugh at myself. Thank you for jumping in when you did, Leoneda. I was trying to tell my computer, would you unmute? Please unmute on technology. So thank you. Rima.
So of course, I'm going to do a little plug for the organization that I run, the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting, because we do offer membership at all levels. I know a lot of people kind of tie it to the professional level, and we do have professional level, but we have student level as well. And we are, wanting to provide more mentorship and networking for students at that level. Membership is free. You can go to idabwellsociety.org, idabwellsociety.org to find out how to be a member. And we deal specifically with training in terms of investigative and accountability reporting, which a lot of times high school and college students, maybe it doesn't sound like the most appealing thing because it sounds like government reporting, but let me tell you, investigation is at every level. lifestyle, arts, entertainment, sports. Think about the Me Too movement. Think about Harvey Weinstein. Think about the things that came out with the cheating scandals in the sports media world. I mean, they're on every level in every genre, of course, in education as well, lots of investigation. Having those skills will take you into any direction, from entertainment to sports to education to any other area that you can think of. So that's the first thing I want to say, because I think sometimes, you know, it got lost over my head when I was a student, just how pervasive it is and how much power you have when you learn those investigative skills. So I'm going to put that out there. But in terms of support, I would say, you know, NABJ, NAHJ, even AAJA, all of those areas, even if you don't fall into, you know, the respective, you know, nationality or ethnicity that's targeted, it's good to be connected to all of them. We're all in some way going through some of the same kinds of challenges. So it's important that we all kind of recognize that we're in this together in a lot of ways. And then I would say, you know, see, even for the high school students, connecting to students who are in CABJ, possibly trying to form mentorship, so you can talk to student journalists, kind of go through what they're dealing with. As Trevi mentioned, there's also an NAHJ chapter at UNC. So reach out, you know, Trevi's here right now. If you're on here, I'm sure you could find out kind of how to connect with some students there and kind of find out what they're going through. DTH, the Daily Tar Heel, has a fellowship program where they're working on diversifying their student media program as well, with the Sharif Durham's fellowship. So there's a lot of different avenues to kind of learn a little bit about the process, what you're getting into. And I'm going to quote one of my bosses, Ron Nixon, who's with the AP, of you also have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, which us as minorities, we're already dealing with that on a daily basis. Like, you know, it's uncomfortable being in our own skin in this country. So it's not that far a cry, but you do have to be prepared. It's not going to be a cakewalk. It's an uncomfortable place. You do have to fight. You have to advocate for yourself. But this hopefully will show you that you got a lot of people in your corner. I'm here to be a resource. I'm sure Trevi and Leoneda are here to be a resource to you as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that as well. I am going to, there are a couple of other questions that I have, but I'm not going to be a mic hog and ask all of them now. I'm going to pivot and ask you a couple of questions that are coming in from our virtual audience, and I'll invite folks to continue to share questions as you have them. One of the questions that's come in is from Mary. Do you encounter more racism or sexism in journalism? Or is it possible to tease those apart? So, your faces. If I could do a screen capture right now of your faces. Who wants to jump in with that one?
I mean, if I could say, I don't know if you can really tease them apart that much, but I will say, at least, I think in my experience, it's a little regional too. So I would say when I don't want to get in trouble with any of the organizations but when I was in New York, sexism was a little bit more prevalent at that point, and I can't speak for every organization there. You know, when I started working down south, racism became much bigger, but it may have been also because of the topics and the subject areas that I was covering. So there's a lot of different factors for that, but I don't know if you can really tease those apart. It's, you know, it kind of gets into that, who has it harder, Black men or white women, which is like, for us, that's not really something that we can, you know, pull apart from there, because we straddle many different parts of the matrix of that.
I don't know. I think when I was a reporter, say like in Milwaukee, you know, in the Midwest, it seemed like I just thought, you know, it didn't matter if you were a woman or not, you're Black. And so, you know, period. And I mean, there were actually newsmakers, you know, like county commissioners, and some towns, they wouldn't even talk to me. Right. I mean, you could try to ask them a question and they would just keep walking. They're like, and you wonder, like, wow, you don't realize, you don't think about, what is it, me? Yeah, it's you, you know, because they would talk to somebody else. And so that would happen all the time. It just, but what I appreciated and why I wanted to come back South to work is because I felt in the Midwest, say, for example, people would pretend that, you know, everything was fine and it wasn't. So like the smile on your face, but when I came back South, no need to smile. You already, you know the lay of the land. And so I purposefully was like, you know, told myself, we're leaving Ann Arbor, Michigan. We're getting out of here. You know, I'm just time to go back South where, you know I can tell stories that I know even better, newsmakers and the like. So I don't know. Sometimes I just play dumb. I don't know if they could ignore me because of my race or gender, and I just move on to the next person. Say, well, I guess you don't know. And so I'll ask someone who does. I mean, so, and I'm just speaking as a journalist, you know, trying to get that story done and trying to get the best, you know, quote from some newsmaker, for example. But yeah, I give them little time to hesitate. And I don't even care what they're thinking. I just say, oh, I'll move on. I go just ask someone else. I don't know what's worse. We're so used to it. Like you said, you know, it's like the double fight always.
Trevi, I wanted to make space for you if you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, I agree with both Rhema and Leoneda. I don't think you can separate it. And I think often just your credibility and your even being in that role is sometimes called into question by people you're trying to interview.
Thank you all. Leon asks, do web platforms like HuffPost make it more equitable for women? And I'll just throw in, or are there other newer technologies that make it more that make it more equitable for women?
Probably, because again, they can't see you, can they? And I think I just read on LinkedIn, well, that's what, you know, the platform of online media and the immediacy of it, when I think of the Huffington Post, which now has a Black woman is like the editor. It's like the top editor now. So I was like, wow, and I've been following her for a while. But so I think there's so many different platforms out there, take advantage of all of them. And like I say, I can't speak necessarily to online media, but I do know my job in public radio specifically that we consider ourselves an online media company as well. You know what I'm saying? So everybody, they all kind of merge in a way. So hopefully there are a lot more opportunities though.
Thank you. Trevi, Rhema, do either one of you want to jump in? All right, we're going to keep putting things on the table. This is from Terry. I love the Pauli Murray podcast. Thank you, Leoneda. As a journalist, do you get to pick your own stories to write about?
I would say yes, I do. I actually was invited to speak somewhere, I don't know how many years ago. And I think it was the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. And they said, well, Leoneda, where do you get your ideas from? I said, oh, whatever I like. I said, whatever I like, that's what I'm doing. And they, you know, they looked a little dumbfounded in a way. And I said, no, I said, I'm the demographic that everybody wants. What are you talking about? You know, from age, you know, education, money, you know, everything. I said, so usually what I like, you'll like. And I mean, I said, I have to work that way because, you know, I mean, I know this is a probably awful quote. I don't even want to say it, but I was like, I cannot let someone else of non-color win another Pulitzer or Peabody talking about me and my people. I'm like, that's not going to happen. I mean, as long as I'm living, you know, I said, I'm not going to let other people tell stories that I live every day. I said, so no, what if I just stick with what I like and what I know? And that's, you know, kind of how I call it. But no, editors do. I mean, I have producers and editors that I work with, and sometimes they give me ideas that I never thought about. I'm like, wow. And one producer told me, well, she was like, well, Leoneda, how am I supposed to read your mind? I say, girl, everybody can read my mind now. I said, you should know exactly what I like, and so we can work together, right? You can make it even better. And so I said, I lay it out there, but I love people to send me notes all the time and emails. And usually it may take a while, but I'm sure I'll shape that into a story. So I like all ideas, and I try to just put them in my voice in a way that, that works.
Thank you for that. I'm going to put another one on the table for us. This one's from Vivian. Are there any stories you wish you had covered differently than you did, and why? Are there stories that you've gone back to for a reason, or that someone else's story that you've countered?
I will give an example of something which I think, just being a little green at the time, I don't know exactly how I would have responded, but there was a piece. It was a relatively small story that I did several years ago about a young man who had been, this was in Pensacola, who had gone missing. His family was very concerned. Now, we had covered something around his family earlier. He was a young Black man, and he'd been missing for quite some time. And I believe, and I'm trying, this was many, many years ago. But his family had contacted us. And at the time, actually, this is where I talk about, sort of having difficulty sometimes with getting the okay to do things that somebody else would always get put on the beat. So there's a white cops beat reporter at the time who had been working on this, and he developed some level of rapport, I think, with the family, and they were contacting him and saying, hey, can you do more about this? Like, this is serious. We can't find him. There's all kind of foul play and things. So he'd been in contact with them, but somehow, and I can't remember all the details of this, somehow they got in contact with me because he wasn't doing much with it. So I said, I think we should do something about this. And again, this is several years ago, so I don't know all of the circumstances behind this, but I do know that I went ahead, I wrote a story and interviewed his family and all of these things. Now, he had a criminal record, and I was aware of that, and that was why I think we kind of knew that there was probably some questionable things, like it was more than just him missing, like it's probably something more nefarious than that. So I went ahead and I wrote a story. And at the time, now looking back, this gets back to something that we weren't talking about at that time. We weren't talking about how being part of that community can humanize those people instead of making them just these one-dimensional characters. So without even thinking about it, I took it on as more of this is a human being, this is his family, this is how they're feeling about this. And I wrote the story along those lines. So that story went up on there was one version that went up on the web and one version that went in the paper, and I can't remember now which one. But I do know that by the next day, I had found out that the editor at the time, who I widely respected, but again, she just, difference in understanding this community. She had decided to have the white reporter go over and re-edit it because she felt like it wasn't, it didn't talk enough about the fact that he was a criminal. And in her mind, it didn't really merit, us kind of making him a sympathetic character. That's really comes down to. And so what came out was a very, very, a story that was just, in my mind now, and I think now in this age of racial reckoning, it probably would have gotten the paper in a lot of trouble, but at that point it didn't, was just this really just very derogatory, just very, like, basically he had it coming, he was like a gang member, all these kinds of things, which, yes, we can make mention of that, but that became like the focal point of this story. And I remember seeing it And the only reason why I knew that they changed is because I got a message from one of the family members, like, how dare you, I can't believe you did this and stuff. And it's not like I, had like, this inappropriate relationship with the family. It was just, I built a rapport with them. I told them, you don't do surprises. So I told them like what we were going to do and everything. I did include the information that he had a record. But the way it was presented was just so, it was awful. And I did not blame the family for feeling the way that they did. But I remember being just also, again, like one of those things, like, why did you feel I went and I did this story, and then without even telling me, you decided to have this other guy go off me? And it was a white guy. I mean, he was a good reporter, but again, he wrote it in such this one-dimensional, like, subhuman kind of way that, that always stuck with me. And I don't know, and at that time I was a little too green to like know how to react to something like that. I think if it was, several years later, I would have reacted in a different way, but at that point you just don't know what to do in those situations. So my regret, I think, is that I didn't come back, I think, and maybe at least ask why they felt the need to do that. And I will say this to any young folks who are listening now, because I know you may find yourself in a similar situation. You will be one of the few that looks like you in there, and you won't know exactly how to react. But I would say take advantage of this moment, because there's a lot more support right now behind challenging those things than I think there were like, 10, 11 years ago.
Thank you so much for that. I'm really mindful of our time, because I one of the warnings we got is that the webinar may just shut down, and I'd hate for that to happen. So I will say thank you to all of you. I told them when they brought us all together, if you let me, I'd be on for hours with you, because I have a list of other questions that I'd love to hear from you about. On behalf of PlayMakers, I want to extend a huge thank you to all the organizers of this. And I think the way that this has come back around really amplifies more Marvel Jackson Cooke's legacy. Remember that we still can see edges of time. So if you haven't, please do. And I hope you're following each one of these brilliant journalists. So I just want to take a moment and say, yay, thank you for your time. Thank you. Thank you.